Hello and welcome. My name is Vlad, and it was quite an intense month. Today I want to talk about some news and stories about this month in my life, show progress on N1L-Runner game, and talk about some interesting things from math and physics applied to game development that made significant changes to Nil's movement mechanic, making it much more powerful and easy to implement. It'll surely be quite a lot. As I said, let's start with some news. This month in university was quite a crunchy at moments. It mostly because of my own decisions. I'm trying to do as much as possible for my classes at this point, so I'm stuck in some really bad crunch at the last weeks of this semester. And I can proudly say that I'm doing great and finished some tasks earlier than it was planned. But it surely didn't let me spend as much time for my game as last month. Good that I set easy goal in the last devlog and finished with it having some time to spare. I decided to spend it on closing technical debts, and then whole city found itself in quite a sticky situation. When I was going to bed one day, temperature outside was around 0 degrees Celsius and it was raining. Nothing special for this time of year. But when I woke up, well, first thing that happened when I took a look into the window was a huge branch of the tree falling right in front of my windows. Can't say that it's a good way to say good morning. Cataclysm like this never happened in my life. Even more, my parents can't remember something that bad. Wires ripped off roofs and hanging in the air and on the ground, broken trees, fallen electrical poles and lamps. At the moment of recording this audio, it's noon of 6th day after the storm, and I still have no internet access at home and mobile network just overloaded, and don't have enough bandwidth to load anything serious. Well, don't have enough bandwidth to load anything at all at moment. Around quarter of the city are still out of electricity and water. We had no water for a day too. Bridge to the island where my university is located closed for 3 days already because of danger of falling ice. It might be opened again tomorrow in the evening, but I have no confidence about this statement. Situation with services is getting better anyway, but it's getting worse for moving around the city. Temperature is still around 0, so most of the roads and walkways are hidden under many layers of snow and ice, and there is no way to figure out if it's slippery or not. And obviously icicles. They are falling everywhere, so there is almost no way to navigate through the city without playing with your luck. This whole situation created many challenges for me and in general made me less productive. For these reasons, it doesn't matter that I worked on the game most of the time for the last few days, progress at this point wasn't that impressive. But, as I said, main goal was reached already, so I wasn't too worried about it. And I want to clarify that I actually did most of the things I planned outside of the main goal. Except some little things that I can finish in the next months as I did with projectiles last time. Speaking of projectiles, all of these things are implemented and now all of the enemies have their behavior finished. And there is actually one more detail about this subject. I decided to change collision shape of Nil to somewhat match shape of his sprite after seeing projectiles in action. It just looked odd when projectiles was hitting space around my character. But turned out that this isn't such a good idea to make collisions curvy. Combined with the fact that blocks are smaller than Nil, it led to characters shaking near collision shapes, and what's worse, it led to the situation where a character can stuck with blocks between his leg and arm, unable to move. Solution for all of these problems is quite obvious. I am just using both of these collisions, one for the movement and other for all the attacks. They are split into different layers and aren't interfering with each other. It might be a good idea to make sprites in such a way that you don't have to worry about two different collision shapes. But I don't want to let this little overhead to limit my art style. Before moving to the next thing, I want to ask you one question. How does Infinity feel like? I think it feels like corruption. This thing bothered me a lot while I was working on my last devlog. Wall of corruption wasn't looking like it should have. It was obviously looking like some strange texture and that's it. And furthermore, collision shape of this wall is just a rectangle that fills texture. This means that if you are above or below this texture, you can easily travel through the space that technically isn't accessible for you. Now all of these problems are fixed and there is no cheaty way to escape the virus. Just a standard trick of the game developer's sleeve. You can see such things all the time in games. There are two copies of wall texture, one of which is always placed at the point with Y that is multiple of texture's height and closest to camera. Other one is placed right above or below first one, depending on which of the positions are visible to camera. You might have already noticed new laser that helps Neil to aim his hook. The final version of it has quite a lot of helpful features. It shows green beam if there is something to hook to in distance, and red beam otherwise. I tried to choose such colors that they are visible but not too bright, so that moving laser won't steal player's focus from the game and won't make it too trippy. First version of laser looked too static, so I decided to add some simple movement to it. I think that now it feels good and makes hook mechanic much more useful and intuitive. I'd call this laser part of UI, but now we are getting to the main points about user interface. First of all, after some research, I figured out that Metroidvania games don't have much of an interface, except some consumables and bars like health and mana. And yes, after some rethinking of this game's core mechanics, I'm leaning towards calling it Metroidvania. At this point, I don't have any plans about consumables that I'm sure about. There are surely be some consumables as part of the upgrade system, but it's only an idea at this point, so only thing that is left to do is health bar. But from design's perspective, it wasn't an easy task in itself. I wanted it to be stylish but yet functional, and most of my ideas about combining both of these properties are literally style over substance. Main part of making it stylish was an idea of some sort of processes. If you remember, we're inside the computer, and Neil is programmed, so he needs to have some processes to stay alive. And I tried to show this idea through the usage of Perlin noise to add some flow to health bars, imitating changes in load of processes. But that didn't make any sense because it just looked like some random stuff that isn't tied to health. Breakthrough in this problem came from just messing with numbers with no goal. I decided to make height of this process a little bit bigger and moved height value to its own constant in code. And then, at some point, I changed it to much bigger number to see how it would look and whether or not it would even work correctly, because I wasn't confident in Godot's control node at this point. Turned out that it makes much more sense after this simple change. To make sure that character's health level is obvious for player, I added additional red line that isn't moving. And all these changes together worked quite well. But counter that shows health value wasn't looking fitting or stylish, so I decided to change it to 7-segment display. Turned out that this isn't as simple as creating a new font. In 7-segment displays there are at least 3 colors to each symbol: background, disabled and enabled segment. And you need 4th color for all of the outlines. After quite long search, I found a way to make font out of SVG files with support of colors. But Godot said no to it. Seems that this font format is quite new and not very popular at this point, so it's not supported by most of the programs. My solution to this problem is that I just used my newly created SVG files with 7-segment numbers as textures and created new counter out of these textures. It's not as configurable as text fields, but it makes the job done for this specific task, and I'm not planning to use it much in the future anyway. So here is my take on UI for this game: 7-segment screen to display health and some quantity of processes tied to health showing some work. This system of processes will also be used in upgrade system. You'll get them from bosses, secrets and other events. And to use additional features and upgrades, you need to connect processes to these upgrades. Obviously, more upgrades you use, less processes are left to be used for health purposes. This mechanic will add some management part to the game and let players find their ways through game. Tough but not very versatile, or jack of all trades but with dangerously low HP. It's up to you. Processes and upgrades can be connected and reconnected as many times as you want at the special stations throughout the game world. I'm planning to add these stations to all of the save points and sometimes in other places. But it's important that player can change Neil's build at any save point, because it creates a possibility to resync the playstyle after this and adapt build to it. And as the last subject for today is a new movement system that I implemented. It's actually inspired by one of 2016 GDC talks by Kyle Pittman called Math for Game Programmers Build a Better Jump that I've seen around the start of this year. I'll leave a link to this video in the description. In this talk, Kyle showed an approach to jumping mechanics through defining trajectory, not some physical constants like gravity that aren't important to gameplay. His idea is to define trajectories through actually important constants like jump distance and height. But I've missed this idea when I started with my game, because I tried to create something fast just to see animations in game. And then I just bear the burden of this technical debt, while adding additional movements and etc. At the start of this month, I had something around 200 to 300 of lines of messy code that implemented movement mechanic. And then I decided that ledge climbing is too slow and it makes you vulnerable. So I wanted to make it faster. I changed some constants and it was faster, of course. But trajectory changed and I broke whole idea behind this mechanic. At this point I remembered about Kyle Pittman's talk and figured that there is always one more property in all of these trajectories: time. And I can use it to implement ledge climbing with right trajectory and configurable speed, things that I was seeking for. But turned out that it's not that simple. We can define dependency between position and time like this, and it'll look something like this. But what if there is one more collision shape right here, right on our way? We can just use our formula in this situation, because it'll look something like this. Obviously not what we are looking for. Let's get to this problem from the physics perspective. What do we have here? Non-elastic collision. This means that wall adds acceleration to our body, and this acceleration is equal to opposite of our instant speed at this point. What can we get from this statement? Everything about collision solving is dependent on our speed. And we can easily define dependency between speed and time. It's the derivative of our last function. After that, we can collect all of the collision normals, multiply them by opposite vector to vector of our speed, and apply it every time we recalculate speed. We solved one problem, but we've come right to another one. What's the difference between these two formulas? Obviously, this time variable. Our main goal is to be able to change speed of our movement by adding some multiplier to it. Let's say that we want it to work twice as fast. And let's say that the highest point of our trajectory is happening when time is equal to 1. So, with multiplier of 2, it should happen after half a second. Would it? No. And it's quite clear from x part of this vector. Speed projected to x is always equal to w, which means that we will get to the point where x equal to w when time is equal to 1 second, not half of it. Because time in movement processing part isn't multiplied by anything, it's just delta between consecutive frames. There are two solutions to this problem. First, we can move our multiplier to some additional variable to use it later in processing, or just multiply our vector by it. Second, we still have our other formula that doesn't have this problem. We can get speed out of it without derivatives, just by subtracting one position from another. And we can obviously use our multiplier speed here. I don't like first approach because it adds additional variable and additional complications with it. Not that it's something important, but I just don't like this idea. Second approach looks more stable and grants that we can just use some graphical calculator to draw our trajectory and not bother with derivation and other complications. So this is my solution in pseudocode. I'll provide link to text version of this code in the description for those who want to use it. I've changed all of Neil's movement patterns to trajectories, except running because it has too much conditions and it just won't make any real difference. And movement on hook also uses its own mechanic with Verlet integration, because you can't predict movement of all the pieces in one simple formula. but all the dashes, jumps and climbs are now defined as trajectories, and this took literally 2 to 3 lines of code to define new movement in this way, so it's quite scalable. Dealing with technical depths in movement system was very important at this point, because the next step of my plan that I mentioned in the last log is working on health and damage system. And it's quite an easy task in itself, but I want to implement knockback effect into this system from the start. It's not quite popular these days to add knockback everywhere, as it was in Nintendo games of old times, but I'm still trying to figure out how I want it to work. Big enemies and hard punches should have knockback anyway, so I think it's important to have this system working from the start. It could be quite a hard task with old movement system, but now I'm sure that it will work without adding even more mess to my code. Anyway, that's it about work on the game for this month. Next on the list, as I said, is health and damage system. Also, I want to try to start working on the third task before the end of the next month. Crab anime took me quite a lot of time, and I want first boss to be around the same size as Crab, maybe a little bigger. But boss needs a lot of animations, so it might take a real lot of time to get it to implementation phase. I won't be too surprised if creation process of this boss will take full months in itself, but only time will tell. Also, I think I found peace with the idea of releasing videos once in a month and being able to show a lot of content each time, while uploading short GIFs and videos to all the socials that you can find in the description. I don't need to worry about releasing videos as soon as possible in this way and can fully focus on working on the game. But next month might be a little bit out of schedule. First of all, it's Christmas time, and I might move release date a little bit to make sure that it won't interfere with my holiday plans. Second on the list is that I am actually working part-time on the other project. It's quite simple, and at this moment I am not ready to show any interesting footages from it, but it will be released somewhere in December. And even more, it will be free and open source project that I will upload to my GitHub and also on itch.io. Anybody can download it and play. So stay tuned, I'll surely put information about it on my socials when it's ready. And third, I'm planning to participate in Game Jam somewhere around December. I'm still not sure which one I want to choose, but I'll notify about it on my socials too. I want to have a little bit of vacation from my main game, and Jam is the best choice for it. It will give me a new breath of inspiration and won't take much time. But as I said, at this moment it's just a plan, and I might move it if it won't work with my schedule. Thanks for watching, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to know if you like this devlog. Share your ideas about ways to make this content better. Stay safe, have a good day, and see you in the next month.